The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, which seemed fitting for a wedding that felt more like a business transaction than a love story. Vespera stood before the full-length mirror in her cramped apartment, adjusting the simple cream dress she'd bought on sale 2 weeks ago. It wasn't the wedding gown she'd imagined as a girl, but then again, nothing about this marriage resembled her childhood dreams. Her fingers trembled as she fastened the pearl buttons at her wrists. In 6 months, she would inherit her grandmother's estate, a sprawling property in the hills that had been in her family for generations. The only catch was the archaic stipulation in the will that she be married before her 28th birthday. That deadline was tomorrow. Enter Dreven Locke, a man she'd met exactly 43 days ago at a charity gala. He'd appeared at her side with champagne and an enigmatic smile, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. Tall, with sharp features that seemed carved from stone and eyes the color of amber in firelight, he'd listened to her complain about her grandmother's ridiculous will with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Marry me," he'd said, as casually as if he were offering her a ride home. She'd laughed, he hadn't. 3 weeks of coffee dates and careful negotiations later, they drafted an agreement. A marriage of convenience lasting 1 year. She'd get her inheritance, he'd get whatever mysterious benefit he claimed to need from the arrangement, and they'd part ways as friends. He'd been frustratingly vague about his motivations, mentioning only that he needed to appear settled for business purposes. The lawyers had approved the prenuptial agreement, and here she was, about to marry a virtual stranger. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Dreven stood in the hallway, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Water droplets glistened in his dark hair, and for a moment, she noticed how his eyes seemed to catch the dim hallway light in an almost reflective way, like an animal's might. "You look beautiful," he said, and something in his voice made the compliment feel less perfunctory than she'd expected. "You're early," she replied, grabbing her coat, eager to seal the deal. A strange expression crossed his face, gone too quickly to interpret. Something like that. The courthouse ceremony was mercifully brief. The judge, a tired-looking woman with reading glasses on a chain, recited the standard vows with the enthusiasm of someone who'd performed this ritual 1,000 times. Vespera's maid of honor was her coworker Margit, who'd agreed to witness the spectacle with barely concealed skepticism. Dreven's witness was a striking man he introduced only as Fenris, who watched the proceedings with an unsettling stillness, barely blinking. When the judge pronounced them married, Dreven's kiss was chaste, but his hand at the small of her back was scorching hot, almost feverish. She pulled away, startled, but he'd already stepped back, signing the marriage certificate with a flourish. "Congratulations, Mrs. Locke," Fenris said, and she could have sworn she heard a growl underneath the words. "I'm keeping my name," she said automatically, then wondered why she felt the need to assert that to a stranger. Dreven had insisted on hosting a small dinner at his home after the ceremony, and Vespera found herself driving behind his sleek black car through increasingly isolated roads. The rain had finally stopped, but thick fog rolled across the asphalt like something alive. She'd never been to his house, realized with a start that she knew almost nothing about where or how he lived. The property appeared suddenly through the mist, a sprawling stone manor that looked like it had been transplanted from the Scottish Highlands. Ancient oaks surrounded it, their gnarled branches creating a canopy that blocked out the dimming afternoon light. Vespera's unease grew as she parked beside Dreven's car. "This is yours?" she asked, stepping out onto gravel that crunched too loudly in the oppressive quiet. "Family estate," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "It's been in the Locke line for generations, much like yours, I imagine." The interior was surprisingly warm, lit by what appeared to be actual torches in iron sconces along the stone walls. Antique tapestries depicted hunting scenes, though the creatures being hunted looked disturbingly wolf-like, walking on hind legs with 2 intelligent eyes. She told herself they were just artistic interpretations of folklore. Dinner was prepared by an elderly woman Dreven introduced as Mrs. Grimshaw, who set out an elaborate spread of roasted meats and root vegetables before disappearing into the depths of the house. Fenris joined them, along with 2 other men, Garrick and Thane, who Dreven vaguely described as business associates. All three had the same unsettling quality of absolute stillness when they weren't moving, and the same reflective quality to their eyes. The conversation flowed easily enough, though Vespera noticed how the men deferred to Dreven, how they seemed to wait for subtle signals before speaking or moving. She drank more wine than she'd intended, trying to calm the inexplicable anxiety building in her chest. "Your grandmother's estate," Dreven said during a lull in conversation. "It borders the Thornwood Forest, doesn't it?" "Yes," Vespera said, surprised he knew. "The property extends right up to the tree line. Why?" Something passed between Dreven and Fenris, a look she couldn't decipher. "Just curious," Dreven said smoothly. "That's protected land, very old woods." "There are stories about those woods," Thane added, his voice rough as gravel. "Things that hunt there." "Thane," Dreven said sharply, and the other man immediately fell silent, looking down at his plate like a scolded dog. The rest of the meal passed in stilted small talk. When Margit called to check on her, Vespera stepped into the hallway to take it, grateful for the excuse to escape the oppressive atmosphere. "This place is creepy as hell," Margit said without preamble. "Are you sure about this guy?" "It's just for a year," Vespera whispered, glancing back toward the dining room. "Then I get the estate and we go our separate ways." "If you say so, but Vesp, there's something off about him. The way he looks at you, it's like..." A hand touched her shoulder and Vespera spun, dropping her phone. Dreven stood inches away, having crossed the stone hallway in absolute silence. "Sorry," he said, though he didn't look it. "I didn't mean to startle you. I wanted to show you something." "I was talking too." "It'll only take a moment." There was something in his voice, almost a compulsion, that made her follow him down the hallway before she'd consciously decided to move. He led her to a heavy wooden door, which he unlocked with an old brass key. Inside was a library, floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with leather-bound volumes. But it was the paintings on the walls that caught her attention. Portraits of severe-looking people, all with the same sharp features, the same amber eyes. All, she realized with growing dread, bearing a striking resemblance to Dreven. "My family," he said quietly, "going back almost 400 years. That's impossible. These paintings would be..." "Priceless, yes." He moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from him again, that feverish warmth that didn't seem quite human. "Vespera, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before, but I knew you'd never believe me. Even now, you won't want to believe it." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What are you talking about?" He turned to face her fully, and in the firelight from the library's hearth, his eyes seemed to glow. "The marriage we just entered into, it's binding in ways the courthouse doesn't recognize, in ways you don't understand yet." "You're scaring me." "Good, you should be scared." He took a breath, and she could have sworn she heard something crack, like bones shifting. "I didn't marry you for business purposes, Vespera. I married you because the moment I caught your scent at that gala, something in me recognized you, claimed you. I married you because you're mine, and you have been since the moment we met, whether you knew it or not." "I don't understand." "Your grandmother's estate borders Thornwood Forest for a reason. Your family has lived on that land for generations for a reason. And that reason is currently standing in front of you, trying to figure out how to explain that the man you just married isn't entirely a man at all." The door behind them slammed shut, and Vespera heard locks clicking into place. Through the heavy wood, she could hear voices, low and guttural, speaking in a language that sounded ancient and wrong. Dreven's face was anguished as he looked at her. "The moon rises in 3 hours, Vespera, and when it does, you're going to learn exactly what you've married into. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but it's too late now. The bond is formed and there's no breaking it. Not ever." His eyes flashed golden in the firelight, and Vespera's scream caught in her throat as she finally understood what those hunting tapestries in the hallway had really been depicting. Not folklore at all. Vespera's back hit the bookshelf, ancient volumes tumbling around her feet. Dreven didn't advance, but he didn't need to. The space between them crackled with something electric, dangerous, inevitable. Listen to me, he said, his voice taking on a strange resonance as if multiple tones were layered beneath his words. I need you to stay calm. Stay calm, her laugh came out harsh, edged with hysteria. You just locked me in a room and told me you're not human. You expect me to. I expect you to survive the night. His jaw clenched, tendons standing out in sharp relief. Which means you need to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Outside the library, she heard movement. Footsteps that seemed too heavy, too numerous. The scrape of something against stone that might have been claws. Her new husband, if she could even call him that, stood between her and the only door, watching her with those impossible amber eyes. I'm a werewolf, he said flatly, as if announcing he worked in accounting. So are Fenris, Garrick, and Thane. So were all the people in those portraits. The Locke family has been cursed, blessed, infected, whatever term you prefer, for nearly 4 centuries. Vespera's mind raced through explanations. Drugged wine, a nervous breakdown, elaborate prank, anything but the impossible thing he was saying. Werewolves aren't real, she whispered. You're a librarian, Vespera. You've read the old stories, the folklore. Every culture has them. Why do you think that is? He moved slightly and she flinched. Pain flashed across his face. I won't hurt you, I can't. That's what I'm trying to explain. The bond you mentioned. A mate bond. It happens rarely, even among our kind. But when it does, it's absolute. His hand went to his chest, rubbing absently at his sternum. I felt it the moment I saw you, like a hook lodged behind my ribs, pulling me toward you. Every instinct I have, every primal part of me recognizes you as mine, as pack, as mate. I didn't agree to that. I agreed to a marriage of convenience, not some supernatural claim on my. I know, his voice cracked. God, don't you think I know? I tried to fight it. For 2 weeks after that gala, I stayed away, tried to convince myself it was a mistake. But the pull only got stronger. And then I learned about your grandmother's will, about the deadline, and I saw a way to bind you to me legally before you knew what you were really agreeing to. The betrayal cut deeper than the fear. You manipulated me. Yes. At least he didn't try to deny it. Vespera forced herself to breathe, to think. The door was locked. Her phone was in the hallway where she'd dropped it. 3 supposed werewolves stood between her and escape. And the man she'd married hours ago was confessing to trapping her in a supernatural bond she didn't understand. Why, she asked. Why go through all this? Why not just tell me the truth? Dreven laughed bitterly. Would you have believed me? Would you have willingly married a monster? Don't call yourself that. The words surprised them both. He stared at her, something like hope flickering in his expression before he shuddered it away. You don't know what I am yet, he said quietly. What I become when the moon rises. A howl split the night outside, long and mournful. Vespera's blood went cold. Dreven's head snapped toward the window, his entire body going rigid. They're starting, he muttered. We don't have much time. Starting what? The change. It's not optional when the moon is full. We can shift at will during other times, maintain control, but tonight. He rolled his shoulders, and she heard that disturbing crack again, bones moving in ways bones shouldn't move. Tonight we're slaves to it. And when you change, what happens to me? That depends. He moved to the fireplace, bracing his arms against the mantel. In the flickering light, she could see sweat beading on his forehead, his hands trembling. The bond should protect you. My wolf should recognize you, defer to you, but I've never had a mate before. I don't know for certain if you'll kill me. If I can control myself around you. His voice had dropped to a growl. The others, they're changing outside because it's safer, away from you. But I can't leave you unprotected. There are other things in these woods, Vespera, other packs, rogues. They'll smell you, smell that you're unbonded, unmarked, and they'll come. Unmarked. He turned, and his eyes were definitely glowing now, no trick of the light. The mate bond isn't complete until it's sealed. Blood, bite, the physical claiming. I haven't done that because I wanted to give you time, let you adjust, but every wolf for miles can sense you're unclaimed. And in our world, that makes you fair game. Horror washed over her in waves. You're saying other werewolves will try to. Take you, yes, Challenge me for you. I'm an alpha, which offers some protection but an unclaimed mate. He shook his head. I've painted a target on your back, and I'm about to lose my ability to protect you rationally. Another howl, closer this time. Then another and another, until the night was filled with a chorus of inhuman voices. Dreven's hands clenched into fists against the stone, and she saw his nails, longer now, darkening into claws. What do I do? Vespera asked, adding how small her voice sounded. Stay in this room. Don't open the door for anyone. I've reinforced it, warded it with silver inlay. The locks will hold against anything except me. His words were coming faster now, slightly slurred, as if his mouth wasn't forming them correctly anymore. If I lose control, if I come at you aggressively, there's a gun in the desk drawer. Silver bullets. Aim for the heart. I can't shoot you. You can and you will if I give you no choice. He stumbled away from the fireplace, and she saw his spine arching, his body convulsing. Vespera, promise me you'll protect yourself. I promise, she whispered. He nodded, then his head snapped back with a crack that made her stomach turn. The scream that tore from his throat shifted mid-sound into something bestial, reverberating off the stone walls. His body bent in impossible ways, bones breaking and reforming, skin rippling as dark fur erupted across his flesh. Vespera pressed herself against the bookshelf, unable to look away from the horrifying transformation. His clothes tore apart as his body expanded, muscles bulging and reshaping. His face elongated into a muzzle, teeth lengthening into fangs. In less than a minute, the man she'd married had been replaced by a massive wolf, easily the size of a horse, with silver-streaked black fur and those same haunting amber eyes. The creature that had been Dreven stood on all fours, its massive head nearly level with her own. It panted, breath coming in harsh huffs, watching her with an intensity that made every primitive instinct scream at her to run. But there was nowhere to run. The wolf took a step toward her, and she forced herself not to move. Another step. She could smell it now, wild and primal, like earth and pine and something fundamentally other. It was close enough to touch, close enough to kill her with one snap of its massive jaws. Instead, it lowered its head and pressed its muzzle against her stomach. The gesture was so unexpected, so oddly gentle, that Vespera's hand moved of its own accord, touching the thick fur between its ears. The wolf made a sound, not quite a whimper, and leaned into her touch. She felt the tension in its body, the barely restrained power, but also something else. Recognition. The bond Dreven had spoken of, tangible now in a way it hadn't been before. Dreven, she whispered. The wolf's ears pricked forward. It looked up at her, and she saw intelligence there, awareness, struggling against animal instinct. Its tail gave a single tentative wag. Then the window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the library floor as two wolves, both smaller than Dreven but still massive, hurtled through. One was rust-colored with scars across its muzzle. The other was pale gray, lips pulled back in a snarl that revealed too many teeth. Dreven's wolf moved so fast she barely saw it. One moment he was pressed against her, the next he was between her and the intruders, his own snarl shaking dust from the rafters. The two wolves skidded to a halt, but they didn't retreat. The scarred one crouched, preparing to spring. Vespera lunged for the desk, yanking open the drawer. Her hands closed around cold metal, the gun exactly where Dreven said it would be. She'd never fired a weapon in her life, but she clicked off the safety the way her father had shown her years ago, aiming with shaking hands. The gray wolf noticed her movement and pivoted, deciding she was the easier target. It gathered itself to leap, and Vespera pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet caught the wolf in the shoulder, spinning it sideways. It yelped, a horrifyingly human sound, and crashed into a bookshelf. Silver smoke rose from the wound, the flesh sizzling. The scarred wolf attacked while she was distracted, but it wasn't coming for her. It launched itself at Dreven, jaws aiming for his throat. The two massive creatures collided with the force of a car crash, claws and teeth flashing as they rolled across the library floor, destroying furniture, shredding tapestries. Vespera tracked them with the gun, but they moved too fast, tangled together in a blur of violence. Blood splattered across the stone floor, dark in the firelight. She couldn't tell whose blood it was. The gray wolf recovered, staggering to its feet despite its injured shoulder. It fixed its eyes on her again, and this time she saw the calculation there. The intelligence. This wasn't mindless animal aggression. This was a person inside that wolf body making the choice to hunt her. She fired again. Missed. The wolf dodged, moving in a zigzag pattern that would have been impressive if it weren't terrifying. It was 10 feet away, then 5. Dreven's howl of rage preceded him. He slammed into the gray wolf from the side, carrying it away from Vespera and through the remains of the broken window. They tumbled out into the night, their snarls fatting as they fought in the darkness beyond. The scarred wolf, bloodied but still standing, watched her from across the library. Behind it, through the shattered window, she could see more shapes moving in the darkness. More wolves circling the manor. How many? 5, 10. The scarred wolf's lips pulled back, revealing bloody fangs, and Vespera realized with crystal clarity that she was about to die. The gun held maybe 3 more bullets. There were at least half a dozen werewolves outside, and Dreven was fighting for his life in the darkness. She was alone, human, helpless. The wolf took a step toward her. Then Fenris crashed through the door she'd thought was impregnable, tearing it off its hinges. The massive gray-black wolf that must have been him assessed the situation in an instant and threw himself at the scarred intruder. 2 more wolves poured in behind him, and Vespera recognized Garrick and Thane from their coloring, fighting alongside Fenris against the invaders. The library became a battlefield. Vespera pressed herself into the corner behind the desk, gun clutched in both hands, trying to track which wolves were protecting her and which ones wanted her dead. The noise was overwhelming, snarls and yelps and the crash of breaking furniture. A wolf broke through the melee, heading straight for her. She raised the gun, but before she could fire, Dreven appeared in the broken window, launching himself at the attacker with such force they both smashed into the far wall. When they separated, the other wolf didn't get up. It lay still, neck bent at an unnatural angle. Dreven stood over the body, heaving, covered in blood. His amber eyes found her across the chaos, and even in wolf form she could read the question there. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, and something like relief flickered across his lupin face. The fighting ended as abruptly as it began. The remaining intruder wolves, outnumbered and outmatched, fled through the broken window into the night. Fenris started to give chase, but Dreven's bark stopped him. The gray-black wolf returned to the library, taking up a guard position near Vespera. 4 wolves now stood in the destroyed library, all watching her. Dreven, Fenris, Garrick, and Thane, she assumed, though it was disturbing how easily she could differentiate them now. Dreven approached slowly, cautiously, as if afraid she might shoot him. Instead, Vespera lowered the gun and slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her legs unable to support her anymore. Dreven laid down beside her, close enough that she could feel his body heat, but not touching. Protecting but not threatening. "This is my life now," she said to the room, to the wolves, to herself. "This is what I married into." Dreven's wolf made a sound that might have been an apology. Outside, the full moon rose higher, and Vespera closed her eyes, wondering what else this nightmare of a wedding night had in store for her. She didn't have to wonder long. As the surviving wolves regrouped in the darkness beyond the manor, a new sound echoed through the night. Not a howl, but something worse. Human screaming, coming from the direction of Thornwood Forest. Coming from the direction of her grandmother's estate. Dreven's wolf was on its feet instantly, every muscle tensed, a growl building in its chest. The other wolves reacted similarly, their hackles raised, all facing the same direction. Whatever was happening at her family's property. Vespera realized with sinking dread was somehow connected to all of this. Connected to why Dreven had really married her. Connected to why her grandmother had lived for decades on land bordering those ancient woods. And as Dreven's wolf turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight with an almost supernatural glow, Vespera understood that the secrets she'd uncovered tonight were only the beginning. The real horror was still waiting for her, somewhere in the darkness of Thornwood Forest. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it began, cut off mid-cry in a way that suggested only terrible things. Dreven's wolf moved toward the broken window, every line of his body radiating the need to run toward the sound, to hunt, to fight. But he kept looking back at Vespera, torn between instinct and whatever remained of his human reasoning. "Go," she heard herself say. "If someone's hurt, go." The wolf's ears flattened against its skull. It took one step toward the window, then stopped, whining low in its throat. The message was clear even without words. He couldn't leave her unprotected, not with hostile wolves still prowling the grounds. Fenris moved to stand beside Dreven, and some silent communication passed between them. The gray-black wolf dipped its head in what looked like acknowledgement, then positioned itself directly in front of Vespera, while Dreven, Garrick, and Thane leaped through the window and disappeared into the night. Vespera and Fenris regarded each other in the destroyed library. Glass glittered across the floor like scattered stars. Blood, some of it still steaming in the cool air, pooled beneath overturned furniture. The dead wolf in the corner was already beginning to change back, its body shrinking, fur receding, until a naked man lay where the creature had been. Vespera looked away, bile rising in her throat. Fenris made a huffing sound that might have been sympathy. He settled onto his haunches, watching the window and door simultaneously, a silent guardian. Minutes stretched into an hour. Vespera's mind spun through everything that had happened, trying to process, to understand, to find some rational foothold in this new impossible reality. Her grandmother's estate bordered Thornwood Forest. Dreven had asked about it specifically at dinner. The screaming had come from that direction. Nothing was coincidence anymore. "My grandmother knew," Vespera said aloud, not expecting a response from the wolf. "Didn't she? That's why the will specified I had to be married before inheriting. She was trying to protect me from something." Fenris's ears swiveled toward her, attentive. "Or maybe she was trying to ensure I'd be tied to someone who could protect me, someone like Dreven." The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture she didn't like. "How long has your pack known about my family?" The wolf couldn't answer, but his silence felt like confirmation. Before she could pursue the thought further, Dreven returned through the window, still in wolf form but moving with obvious pain. Deep gashes scored his side, and he was limping on his front left paw. Behind him came Garrick and Thane, both bloodied but mobile. Garrick carried something in his jaws, a piece of torn fabric that he dropped at Fenris's feet. The smell hit Vespera immediately, even from across the room. Copper and rot and something chemical that made her eyes water. Fenris sniffed the fabric, then looked at Dreven with what could only be described as alarm. Dreven's wolf began to shake, the tremors starting in his limbs and radiating outward. Vespera recognized what was happening, the reverse transformation, bones cracking and reforming, fur receding, until Dreven knelt on the floor in human form, naked and bleeding and gasping for air. "Clothes," he managed, and Thane's wolf disappeared through the door, returning moments later dragging a blanket in his jaws. Dreven wrapped it around his waist with shaking hands, then looked at Vespera with haunted eyes. "We need to leave," he said. "Right now." "What happened? Whose blood is that?" "Not blood, not entirely." He pushed himself to his feet, wincing. "Vespera, how much did your grandmother tell you about Thornwood Forest?" "Nothing. Just that it was protected land, off-limits to development." "Protected," Dreven laughed harshly. "Yes, you could call it that. More accurately, it's quarantined, has been for 200 years. "Quarantined from what?" He looked at the fabric Garrick had brought back, his jaw clenching. "From what happens when werewolves go wrong, when the curse mutates into something worse." The other wolves were changing now, their transformations quicker than Dreven's had been, more controlled. Within minutes, 3 naked men stood in the library, all sporting various injuries. Fenris was the first to speak, his voice rough as if the wolf's growl still clung to it. "It was a feral," he said. "Maybe more than one. The scent markers are all over the forest edge." What's a feral? Vespera asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Dreven met her eyes. A werewolf that can't change back. The human mind gets lost in the wolf, consumed by it, until there's nothing left but hunger and rage. They're stronger than normal wolves, faster, and completely insane. We put them down when we find them, but some escape into places like Thornwood, deep woods where they can hunt without drawing attention. And one of them is at my grandmother's estate. Multiple based on the scent markers. They're territorial, don't usually work together unless something draws them. His expression darkened. Or someone. The attacks tonight weren't random, Fenris said, pulling on pants someone had brought. The wolves that came for Vespera, they weren't from any pack I recognize. Rogues, maybe, but organized rogues. Someone sent them. And used them to distract us while ferals were released onto the estate grounds, Dreven finished. His hands curled into fists. This was planned, coordinated. Vespera's mouth went dry. Released. You're saying someone deliberately let these feral werewolves loose on my property. Your property that you can't legally claim until you're married, Garrick added. He was the stockiest of the four men, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. Convenient timing. Who would do that? Who even knows about? She stopped, realization hitting her. Oh God, the estate manager, Harlow Creed. He's been managing the property since my grandmother died. He was furious when he found out about the marriage clause, said it was going to complicate the trust distribution. Dreven and Fenris exchanged glances. Creed, Dreven said slowly. Older man, pale eyes, walks with a silver-topped cane. You know him. I know of him. He's human, but he's been involved in the supernatural community for decades. Broker, mostly. Information, artifacts, occasionally people. Dreven's voice had gone cold. If he's the estate manager, he's had access to that property for months. Time enough to lay traps, set plans in motion. But why? What does he gain from unleashing monsters on land I'm about to inherit? Maybe he doesn't want you to inherit it, Thane suggested. He was the quietest of the four, with sharp features and observant eyes. Dead heiress, no clear succession, property goes into probate. Could be tied up in legal battles for years while he continues managing it. Skimming profits. Or, Fenris said grimly, there's something on that property he wants. Something your grandmother was protecting. Vespera thought of her grandmother, stern and secretive, who'd spent her final years alone in that sprawling estate, refusing to move even when her health declined. She'd been protecting something. But what? We need to go there, she said. Now, if there are people on that property, if someone's hurt. You're not going anywhere near those ferals, Dreven cut her off. It's too dangerous. It's my property, my responsibility. You're human, Vespera, unarmed, untrained, and unbonded. You'd be dead within minutes. Then bond me. The words fell into silence. All four men stared at her. Dreven's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to track, shock, longing, fear, before settling on something that looked like pain. You don't know what you're asking, he said quietly. I'm asking to survive. You said the bond would protect me, that your wolf would recognize me, defer to me, that other wolves would know I was claimed and back off. She stood, brushing glass from her dress. You also said unclaimed mates are targets. Well, I've been a target all night, and I'm tired of being helpless. So either bond me and let me help deal with this mess, or lock me in a room while people potentially die on my grandmother's land. The bond isn't just magical protection, Fenris said carefully. It's permanent, physical, it changes you. Changes me how? Dreven ran a hand through his hair, leaving smears of blood. You'd be able to sense me, feel what I feel. Distance wouldn't matter. The bond creates a connection between souls, for lack of a better word. You'd never be free of me, Vespera. Never be able to walk away, even after our year is up, even if you grew to hate me. And I'd be marked, she said, remembering his earlier words. The bite. Other werewolves would know to leave me alone. Most would, Garrick corrected. The truly crazy ones, the rogues and ferals, they don't care about pack law. But yes, it would offer significant protection. She looked at Dreven, this man who'd manipulated her into marriage, who'd pulled her into a nightmare world of monsters and magic. But he'd also protected her, stood between her and death multiple times tonight. And beneath the lies and manipulation, she sensed he'd been telling the truth about one thing. He genuinely hadn't wanted to hurt her. "Do it," she said. "Vespera, we're wasting time. People could be dying. Do it now, or I swear I'll walk out that door and drive to the estate myself." She would, too. He could see it in her eyes, the stubborn determination that had probably driven her grandmother to survive alone in those woods for decades. Dreven looked at his pack mates, and whatever he saw in their faces made his shoulders slump in defeat. "Everyone out," he said quietly. "Give us privacy." Fenris, Garrick, and Thane filed out without argument, closing what remained of the door behind them. Alone now, Dreven and Vespera faced each other across the blood-stained library floor. "This will hurt," he warned. "The bond forming, and there's no going back." "I understand." "I don't think you do." He moved closer, and she could see the war playing out across his features. "Once I bite you, once the bond settles, you'll be mine in every way that matters. Not in some metaphorical sense. Mine. The possessiveness I feel now, it will magnify tenfold. I'll know where you are always. I'll feel your emotions like they're my own. And God help any man who looks at you wrong, because I won't be able to control the wolf's jealousy." "Then you'll learn to control it," she said simply. "Because I'm not going to live in a cage, Dreven, bond or no bond." Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. He closed the distance between them, reaching up to brush her hair back from her neck. His fingers were gentle despite the claws that were already forming at their tips, the wolf rising in response to what they were about to do. "Left side," he murmured. "Where the neck meets the shoulder. It'll scar, probably, a mark everyone will see." "Good," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "Let them see." His eyes flashed gold, and she felt his breath against her skin, warm and fast. "Last chance to back out." "Stop stalling." Dreven's laugh was barely human. Then his teeth were in her flesh, and the pain was everything he'd promised and worse. It felt like fire pouring through her veins, rewriting something fundamental at a cellular level. She heard herself scream but couldn't stop, couldn't pull away, couldn't do anything but endure as the bond took hold. Then the pain shifted into something else. Awareness flooded through her, foreign emotions that weren't hers. Fear and possessiveness and desperate relief, and underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that nearly brought her to her knees. Dreven. She was feeling Dreven's emotions, the full weight of what he felt for her crashing through the newly formed bond. When he finally released her neck, she collapsed against him, and he caught her, holding her upright while the world spun. She could feel him now, not just physically but deeper. A presence in her mind, warm and solid and undeniably there. "I've got you," he whispered, and she heard the words both aloud and somehow through the bond, layered and resonant. "I've got you, mate." The word should have terrified her. Instead, it felt right in a way nothing else had all night. Dreven pulled back enough to meet her eyes, his own still glowing. "How do you feel?" "Like I drank lightning," she managed. "And like I can feel you purring even though you're not making any sound." He smiled, brief and genuine. "The bond. It'll be overwhelming at first, but you'll learn to regulate it, to tune me out when you need to." "I'm not sure I want to." The admission surprised her, but it was true. The bond was intrusive, yes, but it was also comforting. She wasn't alone anymore, not really. Would never be alone again. His expression softened, and through the bond she felt his emotions shift, warmth and wonder and something that might have been love, or the beginning of it. But then his jaw tightened, and she felt him forcibly pull his feelings back, shielding her from the intensity. "We need to move," he said, all business again. "Can you walk?" "I think so." Her neck throbbed where he'd bitten her, but the pain was already fading, replaced by a strange, tingling sensation. "What happens now?" "Now we go to your grandmother's estate, deal with whatever Creed has unleashed, and figure out what he's really after." Dreven grabbed clothes from a trunk in the corner, dressing quickly. "And Vespera, when we get there you stay close to me, no matter what we find. Understood?" She nodded, accepting the jacket he handed her. It smelled like him. She realized, and the bond purred its approval at being wrapped in his scent. They found the others waiting in the hallway, now fully dressed and armed with various weapons that looked both ancient and deadly. Fenris handed Dreven a wicked-looking blade with silver inlay along its edge. "For the ferals," he said simply. "They won't go down easy." "Nothing ever does," Dreven replied. He looked at his pack, then at Vespera. Through the bond, she felt his determination crystallize into something sharp and dangerous. "Let's go hunting." They moved as a unit through the manor and out into the night. The moon hung high and full, turning everything silver and strange. Vespera climbed into Dreven's car while the others got into a second vehicle, and as they drove toward her grandmother's estate, she watched the dark trees of Thornwood Forest grow closer. Something waited for them there in the darkness, something her grandmother had spent her life guarding against, and now it was Vespera's turn to face whatever secrets the forest held. Through the bond, she felt Dreven's grim anticipation and realized with startling clarity that he'd known this moment was coming, had probably known from the moment he'd decided to marry her. "You knew it would come to this," she said as they turned onto the long drive leading to the estate. "Whatever's about to happen, you've been preparing for it." Dreven's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Your grandmother and I had an agreement," he admitted. "Before she died, she asked me to protect you, to bind you to the pack before her death triggered certain events." "What events?" He didn't answer, because they'd reached the estate gates, and what they found there made words unnecessary. The gates hung open, twisted off their hinges. Deep gouges scarred the metal claw marks that glowed with a sickly green phosphorescence. Beyond them, the long drive stretched toward the manor house, lined with ancient oak trees. Trees that were covered in blood, and symbols painted in something that looked disturbingly like bile. And standing in the center of the drive, illuminated by the headlights, was Harlow Creed. He leaned on his silver-topped cane, smiling, very much alive and completely unconcerned by the carnage surrounding him. "Mrs. Locke," he called out cheerfully. "Or should I say, Mrs. Locke Creed, since I've decided to contest the will after all. Your grandmother's property has such interesting secrets buried beneath it, secrets I've spent months unearthing. And now that you've so kindly completed the marriage requirement, well, it's time to claim what's rightfully mine." Behind him, shapes moved in the darkness between the trees. Large shapes, with eyes that reflected the headlights in shades of red and green instead of the natural amber of true wolves. Ferals, at least a dozen of them, and every single one was staring at Vespera with hungry, insane eyes. Dreven was out of the car before Vespera could blink, positioning himself between her and the ferals. The other vehicles screeched to a halt behind them, and Fenris, Garrick, and Thane emerged with weapons drawn. The air crackled with tension, predators on both sides sizing each other up. "Creed," Dreven's voice was barely human, a growl threading through every syllable. "Call them off, now." The estate manager chuckled, tapping his cane against the ground. The silver top caught the moonlight, and Vespera noticed symbols etched into the metal, similar to the ones painted on the trees. "Why would I do that? I've spent considerable resources acquiring these specimens, training them after a fashion. They're remarkably obedient once you understand what motivates them." "You can't control ferals," Fenris said flatly. "No one can." "Not through traditional pack dynamics, no, but there are older methods, darker ones." Creed's pale eyes gleamed. "Your kind has forgotten so much over the centuries. The original curse wasn't meant to create noble beasts who could shift at will. It was meant to create weapons, mindless, unstoppable killers who served their master's will." Vespera felt Dreven's rage through the bond, hot and barely contained. She placed a hand on his back, and some of the tension left his shoulders. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. "Ah," Creed said, tilting his head. "You've bonded her already. How delightfully premature. I was hoping to watch that particular drama unfold over weeks, but I suppose you sensed what was coming." He pointed his cane at Vespera. "Did he tell you why your grandmother really left you this estate, dear girl? Did he explain what lies beneath it?" Why don't you enlighten me? Vespera said, stepping up beside Driven despite his warning growl. This land sits atop one of the oldest supernatural convergence points in North America, a place where the veil between worlds grows thin. Your ancestor, the original Calloway who settled here in 1647, didn't choose this location by accident. She was a witch, and a powerful one. She bound something here, trapped it beneath the earth with wards and blood magic. Creed's smile widened. And your grandmother spent her entire life maintaining those wards. But she's dead now, and the wards are failing. Can you feel it, the wrongness in the air? Vespera could. Now that he mentioned it, there was something off about the atmosphere around the estate. A heaviness, a sense of reality stretching thin like old fabric. The ferals moved restlessly in the shadows, agitated by something she couldn't see. What did she trap? Driven demanded. The source, Creed said simply. The original curse. The entity that created the first werewolves before your kind sanitized the story into something almost noble. It's been imprisoned here for nearly 400 years, and it wants out. Can you imagine the power of the being that could do that to me? He laughed, the sound unhinged. I've devoted my life to studying the supernatural, collecting artifacts, serving as a middleman for creatures who could kill me with a thought. Always powerless, always human. But if I free what's trapped beneath this earth, if I make a bargain with it, you'll doom us all, Fenris said. That's what you'll do. The original curse wasn't just about creating werewolves. It was about unleashing chaos, destroying the balance between worlds. Balance is overrated. Creed tapped his cane again, and the ferals tensed. I gave Mrs. Calloway the chance to make me a partner to share the estate's secrets. She refused, called me a fool, said I didn't understand what I was tampering with. So I waited for her to die, for her granddaughter to inherit, and for the perfect moment to make my move. The marriage clause, Vespera said, understanding clicking into place. You added it to the will. My grandmother never wanted that stipulation. On the contrary, your grandmother added it herself, though not in the way I'd hoped. She wanted you married to Locke specifically, wanted you protected by his pack before the wards failed completely. I merely adjusted the timeline, made sure you'd be cutting it close, distracted, vulnerable. He gestured to the ferals. And then I ensured Locke would be too busy defending his new bride to stop me from accessing what lies beneath the manor. The attacks tonight were all distractions, Thane said. The rogues at the manor, the ferals here, you wanted us scattered. And it worked beautifully. While you were all playing hero, I've been in the estate's basement, carving away at wards that have stood for centuries. A few more hours and the prison will crack open. Creed's expression turned reverent. Can you imagine being present for the birth of a new age of darkness? You're insane, Vespera breathed. I'm ambitious. There's a difference. He lifted his cane, and the ferals moved forward as one, a coordinated pack despite their madness. Now I'm afraid I need you all to die. The entity trapped below feeds on death, on blood spilled on this land. Your deaths will weaken the remaining wards considerably. Nothing personal, you understand. There are 4 of us, Driven said, his body already beginning to shift, bones cracking as he prepared to change. And we're not mindless beasts. You've made a fatal miscalculation. Have I? Creed smiled. You're assuming these are all the ferals I've collected. The trees erupted with movement. More ferals, perhaps 20 additional creatures, poured out of Thornwood Forest. Their eyes glowed with that unnatural red-green light, their bodies twisted and wrong, fur matted with substances that shouldn't exist. They moved with jerky, puppet-like motions, and Vespera realized with horror that Creed wasn't just controlling them through old magic. He was possessing them. You're channeling the entity's power, Fenris said, his voice tight. You've already broken through part of the wards. You're letting it use you as a conduit. I invited it in. Creed's eyes flashed the same red-green as the ferals. And in return, it's giving me a taste of what I'll become once it's free. Power beyond imagination. Control over every cursed creature in the Americas. I'll be a god. You'll be dead, Driven snarled. That thing will consume you the moment it doesn't need you anymore. Perhaps, but what a glorious death it will be. Creed slammed his cane into the ground, and the ferals attacked. Everything became chaos. Dreven finished his shift in seconds, his massive wolf form launching into the fray. Fenris, Garrick, and Thane changed just as quickly, 4 wolves against 24 ferals, and whatever dark magic Creed was wielding. Vespera raised the gun she'd grabbed from the library, but the targets moved too fast, wolves tangling together in a knot of violence. Through the bond, she felt Dreven's fury, his fear for her. His desperate need to end this quickly. But the ferals were relentless, and something about them was wrong. They didn't feel pain the way they should. Wounds that would drop a normal wolf barely slowed them down. A feral broke through the line, heading straight for Vespera. She fired, catching it in the chest. It stumbled but kept coming. She fired again, the bullet taking it in the skull. Finally, it fell, but 2 more were already filling the gap it left. The house, Dreven's voice echoed in her mind through the bond, and she realized with shock that they could communicate this way now. Get to the basement. Stop Creed from breaking the final wards. I can't leave you. Gio, the force of his mental shout nearly knocked her over. Trust me, we'll hold them here, but if those wards fall completely, none of this matters. Vespera ran. She felt like a coward, leaving them to fight while she fled, but she understood the logic. She was human, a liability in this kind of battle. But inside the house, dealing with wards and magic and whatever Creed had done, maybe she could make a difference. The Manor's front door hung open, another bad sign. Inside, the house she remembered from childhood visits had been vandalized. Furniture overturned, portraits slashed, and everywhere those glowing symbols painted on walls and floors. They pulsed with sickly light, and Vespera felt her stomach turn as she recognized some of them from her grandmother's old journals. Blood magic, sacrificial wards, summoning circles. The basement stairs descended into darkness that seemed thicker than it should be, almost solid. Vespera fumbled for a light switch, but nothing happened. The symbols on the walls provided the only illumination, painting everything in shades of green and crimson. At the bottom of the stairs, she found the old root cellar that she'd played in as a child. Except now the floor had been torn up, revealing stone underneath. Ancient stone, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. And in the center, where her grandmother had kept preserved vegetables, a hole gaped in the earth. The hole pulsed like a wound, and from it emanated a presence so malevolent that Vespera's knees buckled. This was what her grandmother had guarded all those years. This was what Creed wanted to unleash. Impressive, isn't it? Vespera spun. Creed stood on the stairs behind her, having followed silently. His cane was gone, and his hands were covered in something black and viscous that moved of its own accord. The prison is nearly broken, he said conversationally. I can feel it straining against the last wards. Your grandmother was clever, layering protections, tying them to bloodlines and phases of the moon. But nothing lasts forever, not even her magic. You don't understand what you're doing, Vespera said, backing toward the hole despite every instinct screaming to get away from it. That thing will destroy everything. It will remake everything. Humans have dominated this world for too long, building cities over sacred places, driving the supernatural into hiding. The entity below, it remembers when things were different, when humans were prey and monsters ruled the night. Creed's smile was beatific. I'll be its prophet, its first servant in the new world. You'll be its first victim. Better to die serving greatness than live in mediocrity. He raised his blackened hands. Now I need one more thing to break the final ward. Blood of the Calloway line, spilled willingly over the prison. Your grandmother refused. But you, I think, won't have a choice. The black substance on his hands launched toward her like living tentacles. Vespera dove aside, but one caught her ankle, yanking her off balance. She hit the stone floor hard, the gun skittering away. The tentacle pulled her toward Creed, who produced a knife from his belt. Don't worry, he said. It won't hurt for long. Through the bond, Vespera felt Dreven's panic, felt him trying to break away from the battle to reach her. But he was too far, fighting too many ferals. She was alone. Except she wasn't, not entirely. The bond thrummed with power, with connection, with something primal that recognized danger to its mate. And Vespera realized that the bond worked both ways. If she could feel Dreven's emotions, his power. She reached through the connection, not knowing exactly what she was doing but trusting instinct. The bond responded, and suddenly she felt the wolf, not Dreven's wolf but something deeper. The curse itself, the magic that made werewolves possible, and through the bond she could touch it. Power flooded through her. Not enough to shift, she was still human, but enough. Her eyes flashed gold, and when she grabbed the tentacle wrapped around her ankle, it recoiled as if burned. Creed stumbled back, shocked. "That's not possible," he whispered. "You're human, you can't channel the curse." "I'm bonded," Vespera said, her voice carrying an echo of Dreven's growl. "And you've made a terrible mistake." She lunged for the gun, grabbed it, rolled, and came up firing. The bullet struck Creed in the chest, all silver, all deadly to anything touched by the curse. He went down hard, the black substance on his hands dissipating like smoke. But as he fell, he laughed. "Too late," he gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "I already broke enough wards. My death will complete it. Blood of the one who freed it spilled on the threshold. The entity comes." The hole in the floor erupted with black light. Vespera felt the presence surge upward, ancient and furious and hungry. The entity that had cursed the first werewolves, imprisoned for 4 centuries, finally breaking free. Except the wards weren't completely broken. The prison had cracked, but not shattered. And Vespera, standing over Creed's body with power still singing through her veins from the bond, understood what her grandmother had really prepared for. Not to keep the entity imprisoned forever. That was impossible. But to ensure that when the wards finally failed, someone would be there to forge a new prison. Someone with Calloway blood and werewolf magic and the will to sacrifice. "No," Dreven's voice in her mind, horrified as he realized what she was thinking. "Vespera, no, don't you dare." "I have to," she whispered. "It's what my grandmother wanted. Why she made sure I'd be bonded to you, connected to the curse. So I could do what she'd done, tie the wards to a new bloodline, our bloodline. It will kill you, the magic required." "Will it?" She looked at Creed's body, at the symbols on the walls, at the whole spewing darkness. "Or will it transform me into something else? Something that can guard this prison the way my grandmother did?" She didn't wait for an answer. Vespera placed her hands on the stones surrounding the hole and reached through the bond, pulling on every ounce of power Dreven possessed. She felt him try to resist. Try to protect her, but the bond was too new, too strong. The power flowed through her like fire, like lightning, rewriting her cells the way the bite had begun to. The Calloway blood in her veins recognized the wards, the ancient magic her ancestor had woven. And the werewolf curse flowing through the bond recognized the entity trying to escape, its progenitor and enemy both. The two magics collided inside Vespera, and she screamed as her body tried to contain power never meant for a human frame. The symbols on the stone blazed white-hot. The hole began to seal, the darkness retreating as new wards snapped into place. But these wards were different, forged from 2 bloodlines instead of 1, from 2 magics that had never been meant to combine. Vespera felt herself changing, not into a wolf, but into something else. Something that existed between human and supernatural, a guardian specifically designed to hold this prison. She felt her connection to the land deepen, felt roots spreading through the earth from where she knelt, anchoring her to this place. "No," Dreven crashed through the basement door, human again, blood-covered and desperate. He grabbed her shoulders, trying to pull her away from the stone, but it was too late. The transformation was already complete. Vespera opened eyes that glowed not gold like a werewolf's, but silver like moonlight on water. She looked at her hands and saw them covered in symbols that matched the ones on the stone, tattoos that hadn't been there before, written in light and magic. "I'm okay," she said, and was relieved to hear her own voice, still human, still hers. "I think I'm okay." Dreven pulled her against his chest, his whole body shaking. Through the bond, she felt his terror, his relief, his fury at what she'd risked. But underneath it all, something else. Awe, because he could feel what she'd become, the power now permanently woven into her being. "You're not human anymore," he whispered into her hair. No, she agreed. But I'm not a werewolf either. I'm something new. A guardian, maybe, tied to this land and the prison beneath it, tied to you through the bond. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Is that going to be a problem? He laughed, the sound cracking with emotion. A problem? Vespera, you just forged new wards using magic that shouldn't be possible, survived a transformation that should have killed you, and bound yourself to a supernatural prison for what might be the rest of your very long life. And you want to know if it's a problem. Well, when you put it that way, she felt dizzy, exhausted, and somehow more alive than she'd ever been. Did we win? Are the ferals dead or scattered? The moment you sealed the prison, they lost whatever was controlling them. Most tore themselves apart in confusion. His expression darkened. We lost Garrick. One of them got his throat before we could stop it. Grief stabbed through her, both her own and Dreven's through the bond. A man she barely knew, dead because of her inheritance, her family's secrets. I'm sorry. He died protecting his alpha's mate. In our world, there's no greater honor. Dreven helped her to her feet, and she realized the symbols on her hands extended up her arms, disappearing beneath her clothes. Can you walk? I think so. She tested her legs, found them steady despite everything. We should check on the others and figure out what to do with Creed's body. Already being handled. Fenris appeared in the doorway, bloodied but alive. His eyes widened when he saw Vespera, taking in the glowing symbols and the power radiating from her. Well, that's new. Understatement, Thane added, appearing behind him. His gaze went to the sealed hole in the floor, now covered by stone that looked like it had never been disturbed. The prison. Secure, Vespera said, and somehow she knew it was true. She could feel it now, a presence at the edge of her consciousness, the wards she'd forged humming with power. It will hold, for a few more centuries at least. And you, Fenris asked carefully, will you hold? She considered the question. She was tied to this land now, bound to it in ways she was only beginning to understand. The estate wasn't just her inheritance anymore. It was her responsibility, her purpose. She would spend the rest of her life, however long that might be, maintaining the prison her ancestor had created. But she wasn't alone. Through the bond, she felt Dreven's absolute commitment, his acceptance of this new reality. Where she stayed, he would stay. His pack would become her pack. Her burden would become theirs. I'll hold, she said finally. We'll hold. Dawn was breaking by the time they emerged from the basement. The estate grounds were littered with feral corpses, already dissolving into ash the way supernatural creatures did when they died. Garrick's body had been carefully moved to the house, and Thane was performing some kind of ritual over it, honoring the fallen. Vespera stood on the front steps, watching the sun rise over Thornwood Forest. The wrongness in the air had dissipated, the wards humming contentedly beneath her feet. This was her home now, truly. Not just a property she'd inherited, but a place she was bound to, body and soul. Regrets? Dreven asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. She thought about it. 24 hours ago, she'd been a librarian with a modest apartment and a simple life. Now she was something else entirely, married to a werewolf, bound by magic to an ancient prison, responsible for keeping horrors contained. Ask me in a year, she said. He smiled, slipping his hand into hers. Through the bond, she felt his emotions clearly now that she was learning to read them. Love, still new but growing, pride in her strength, contentment that she was his mate, his partner in this strange life they'd been thrust into. But underneath it all, she felt something else. Worry, unease, a knowledge that this wasn't.